we're quite glad, to have you. And this is a topic and a session that I think has been top of mind for a lot of people. Just given the kind of things that are happening in the world, and given you've had the rare position of being at one of the top operationally intensive companies in the country, as well as being at one of our few homegrown AI startups as well. So couldn't think of a better person to sort of talk to the community at the blend of operations, business, and what artificial intelligence potentially means for all of this.
Yeah, glad to be here and happy to share what I learned through the journey and what perspectives I'm learning continuously when I meet new startups, etc., in my new role.
Awesome. So maybe why don't we get started with a quick primer on your background? We've done our best to represent your career, but it's been a vast career across so many different things. Would love to know more about how your roles, experience shaped your journey, and any specific learnings that you have to share along the way. And maybe we get started from there.
Sure. So I'll just take a step back. Start with my first role, which started as a chemical engineer at Procter & Gamble's technical center in Kobe, in Japan. And I was working on things like formulations, program managing a new manufacturing plant setup. And there were several learnings, but the key learning was as a third-party observer, if you look at the advantages that a company gets when they put emphasis on process, right? You can create an everlasting company. And everything about Procter & Gamble, and I am sure similar companies, is about process, the right incentives, that just makes this engine going, right? So if you would look at a company like that, it attracted the best talent. It kept challenging them with new good work, had a mechanism for keeping the innovation going, great incentive, disincentive structures. And that's a very humbling experience for an individual who is working in that company, because it is actually individual independent in that sense, no person dependency at all, right? And it's also inspirational that when you eventually create a large corporation, that's a role model to see, right? Post that, I have done an entrepreneurial, at least an attempt to be a good entrepreneur after returning to India. There were three of us. We took an entrepreneurial opportunity to start training.com. The main learnings there were that you can do a lot with less, right? Second, this was a strange structure where it was a startup within a large corporation, right? So although it would be a different entity in the future, with complete autonomy with the founders, which is us, we also saw that how structure, bureaucracy early in the company just kills the company, right? So second was incentive alignment, right? You are working on a side project for a company or a large corporation, or it is your life's mission. Your life depends on it, right? Very big differences. So obviously, for all of these reasons, it didn't work very well. Started investing in different companies, getting inspired by very good entrepreneurs in health tech, clean tech as part of Venture East. Post this, let's call it my first attempt to be an entrepreneur. Post that, I just felt that it's the time to create new things. Great companies were getting created in India. Flipkart was coming out, etc. So about 2013-14 timeframe, I teamed up with one of my colleagues, started Gen Y Medium, which is a marketing tech and services company. And obviously, because it is a startup, the amount of learning amassed here is huge. So huge amount of learnings. But if I were to point out a few, right, I would say select the best, the right addressable opportunity, because you're giving your lives 10, 15 years, if not all your life, to this adventure. It better be worth it, right? So selecting the right addressable market or sector to build in was something that we learned. Um, the other is, you know, this is something that we didn't do enough, which was uh, zero tolerance for mediocrity, right? Let's say, playing to the prima donnas, which always are there in smaller companies, early stage startup companies, etc. And the ability to take decisions which are harsh, fast, right? So these were some of the things that I believe are my learnings, at least from Gen Y. There is, you can go on and on from the number of learnings, but um, I would say these were primarily the learnings. And of course, these are learnings from mistakes that we have made in the past, and we hopefully, as entrepreneurs or future entrepreneurs, we do not make the same mistakes again, right? Maybe new ones. So that was my entrepreneurial journey. Sold the company to Ola. Had an amazing experience, very contrasting with my own stint as uh, running a startup. Uh, one the main point that I mentioned, that select the right opportunity. Is it big enough? Is it global? Right? That the relevance and the importance of that, keeping the future in mind, was very, very clear. The second was, how do you assemble the best team that is out there, whether from India or global or expats, right? That is step number one, probably. If you're not doing that, then you will not be able to do something dramatic which has not been done before. That was the second experience. This is more related to Ola Electric, Krutrim, right? Where we were doing things where probably some of the talent was not available easily, right? And the third was uh, just the, let's say, your confidence on the young to deliver, right? It's, I just enjoyed working with very young guys who are right out of college, uh, are ready to take the chances, put just the tremendous amount of sweat to develop something. I think that is the alpha of a small company versus a big company, right? This young power, right? If you don't have enough young people in the team who are very motivated with the purpose, etc., you'll not be successful, at least not as successful. So my belief in this alpha in the company just increased, right, over a period of time, and especially my last stint with Ola. So those are, let's say, I'd say, encompassing the learnings so far.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. And maybe one further question from my side. I mean, we've all heard about Krutrim from the outside. I'm sure a lot of people are also curious about what the company does a little bit on the day to day. Maybe you could also tell us a little bit about the kind of work that you were doing at Krutrim, and then we'll use that as the segue into the rest of the conversation about AI and the world today.
Yeah, so if you look at the primary vision behind Krutrim, which continues to be the same, and it is in the public domain, is to build the necessary infrastructure so that entrepreneurs, startups, developers in India can also start building on top of that infrastructure, right? So it's not a end application company, right? It's a infrastructure company. Now, infrastructure is of two types, right? Soft infrastructure and the hard infrastructure, let's say. And on the soft infrastructure in the new AI world, you need models, right? But how do you differentiate these models? Because there are huge global models which will always keep coming, and these are very resource intensive, etc. So there must be a use case to define what the model is. And for us, it was two primary reasons. One is we are a different country with different cultural nuances, multiple languages, etc. And the thought was that AI will kind of transcend all end applications, which is happening right now, right? So when you, as a user or a developer, you have a question, right? Or you have a query, the response will be global. It won't be kind of very nuanced for India, right? And that you will see as you play with these tools, etc. You will realize that first AI is encompassing almost all end applications. It will happen, and the second is it is your window to the world, right? Because these applications are your window, and at the end, at the baseline, it's the an AI model that powers it. So practically, you would lose any difference, any cultural nuance you may have, any multilinguality you may be desiring. And therefore, you needed foundational models, right? So this was one, let's call it the soft infrastructure. And on top of it, different application developers could build applications, right? So an example would be if you want to do a healthcare application for rural India, right? Which is a government service, right? How would you do that without having a voice interface? Because people are not very, used to typing, etc., in their mother tongue. And how do you then reply back or give information in things, because healthcare is very contextual, right? It is not you can't take responses which are set up in the US where they're in or the UK where there is NHS, etc. We have a very different infrastructure, so the context is very important, right? So one is the interface, the ability to correspond with the user in the right manner, and finally the um, the infrastructure that exists, right? So that's an example, right? So the software infrastructure was there. The second was, of course, the entire cloud infrastructure, right? So which is the hard part, right? So there is no native India cloud. You are dependent on AWS, Azure, GCP, and without that, you will not have any control on the infrastructure. And if you look at the multiplier effect of having your own cloud infrastructure, you have to look to China, right? So you look at their cloud economy. It's all Ali Cloud. It's Tencent Cloud, right? They have, very soon you will see DeepSeek 2, which will be Huawei based. So they have their own semiconductors and so on. And of course, they are behind, but they will not be behind for the forever, right? Because some hard calls were taken years ago, right? And we felt that that is something that needs to be done. And with the experience of building Ola cabs, and Ola Electric was also on the way along that time, it was very important to uh, take a bet, which various other companies who have never done hardware, who have not done manufacturing, would not take, right? And it's a very capital intensive business, as you know. So very few people would be able to do it. And that was the vision with which we started, that, okay, we'll create an infrastructure company which will have soft infrastructure, hard infrastructure, and enable this AI ecosystem. And there is a big void there, right? We only have companies which are from overseas. So that was like the grand vision with which we started. And of course, we built a team of about 250 engineers spread across primarily Bangalore. This is the youth power I tell you about, right? That just incredible. But very specialized skills like cloud engineering in Singapore, or LLM development expertise and experience in the Bay Area. So that was a big effort. And yeah, I think the journey has been progressing since then. You will see a lot more coming out, both hard and soft on the soft side, in the near future.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, for that background on both what you've been up to over the last several years and for this clear sort of look into what Krutrim has been doing as a company, why, how it started, what its aims were. Maybe getting a little bit into the subject matter for today, right? I think the impetus for where we also wanted to do this session came from this place that, we've been seeing just the sheer impact of AI in our personal lives, right? I don't think there's anybody in this call at this point of time who's not using at least some AI chatbot for work, for personal use on the regular basis. And then second, if you're a little bit closer to the tech ecosystem, whether you're, a software developer or you're in the VC ecosystem, like I have the privilege of being, you also keep coming across just the sheer amount of work that companies are doing, building different applications. And then this entire context over the last 1 year of very, very small companies with like teams that are just in the dozens of people,
Hmm.
which are scaling to tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue faster than businesses have ever done before, right? So that was where the impetus came from. And we thought, if we want to, we've been trying here at Ops Matters to help people figure out, how to sort of build their companies to be more successful in their roles functionally. And one of the areas there that came to mind was how do we also then leverage AI to do some of these things? So maybe we start at the top, right? From your vantage point, your perspective, what you've seen at Krutrim, the applications that people had started trying to build using the capabilities that you were providing, what you're seeing from an investor's perspective at TDK today. Could you give us a brief idea of what is sort of the state of AI today? What are some of these core business operations, these customer experiences that, at least from what we're seeing today, there is a fundamental opportunity for redesign, right? Like if you're a product manager, if you're an operations leader, whoever you are, you're building a business at this point of time. Maybe from the value chain of the business perspective, give us a little bit of a sense of where are the different places at a high level where you think AI can be deployed well today, and then we'll jump into a little bit more of the specifics of how to think about it.
Sure, sure. So maybe let me start by talking about the broad areas of interest going forward, or even now for TDK Ventures, right? Which is, uh, we are a corporate VC fund, and working primarily on two sectors. One is, computing, which is basically broadly AI driven right now, right? Which is, let's say, half of our focus, and the other half is climate transition, right? And there's a lot of in between also, because computing is very power consuming, right? So these are the two blocks and the overlap, right, in which we function. And TDK looks at it very, very comprehensively, right? So I'll tell you what we don't look at. We don't look at end applications at all, right? We are not a software oriented company, investing firm. There are many companies who do SaaS, AI applications, etc. We don't do that. But if you look at other things which are related to AI, and that squarely falls under the infrastructure side, right? What happens inside the data center, AI data center, and what happens outside it, right? We look at all of that very comprehensively. So let's look at what is inside the data center, right? So you have these application specific or AI accelerators. We have made an investment in Grok, not the with the one with the K, but the Q, right? Which does very fast inferencing. So that is one of TDK Ventures investment, which is on the semi side, right? Now, besides the silicon, you have all the AI is constrained actually by the interconnect, the networking, right? So we have done investments in that space, some announced, some not announced, but very exciting spaces there, which allows very high bandwidth data interchange, which is very required in building large language models and large models in general, right? So you would have photonics companies, co-packaged silicon photonics, etc. These are of interest, and we have made an investment in a company called Nubis, doing really well on the back of the advent of AI. Then you would see companies like in the fab side, right? So there is a trend towards doing chiplet-based architectures, and you need specialized fabs to do that. We have made an investment in Silicon Box. It's a unicorn. Grok is also a unicorn. We have, been lucky in that sense that several of our bets have turned out to be unicorn type ideas, and we came in early. So Silicon Box is an example which is doing these packages for chiplets, which is the dominant architecture. You will see all the new releases by NVIDIA and others would be using this architecture. So that's an example. So you'd see this is all within the system. Actually, it is within the server system, right? You have semiconductors, you have the interconnects that I spoke about, the fab which creates the semi in the first place, and also cooling systems which are material science led. How do you cool down the semiconductors where such compute is happening? So this is all inside the data center. And outside the data center, the key questions in AI is, where do you get the power from, right? On one side, because you want to do very large clusters of AI servers for larger model training. It cannot be distributed, right? So that is one problem statement. And second is the how do you take this power in an intelligent manner so that there is no wastage, right? So we have made investments in a nuclear fusion company called Type 1 Energy. You would see a lot of movement to nuclear power for data centers because it's clean, it's distributed. You can get a huge capacity. Let's say you want to do 1 gigawatt data center in India. There is no site available. You can't do it, right? But that is the need for the future. You will see Microsoft, Meta, everybody investing in nuclear power or building one, right? Building a data center which is 1 gigawatt type. So the scale up requires this. Then the transmission, right? So when you do this kind of power generation, which is variable in nature, you want renewable energy to be used, you need transmission, right? And that is a company, we have invested in a company called Ampere Sand, based out of Singapore, which is doing these solid state transformers. So not the conventional low frequency transformers, but semiconductor defined, using semiconductors, you know, transformers. So that's another domain. So this is all AI backwards, right? What will AI need in terms of infrastructure, and what will therefore what we'll do. We are doing several things on the software side also, but that is again foundational models, not end applications per se, right? I can talk through later, but that's our view as a firm on what we are looking at, right? And the key point of your discussion here was more on the end application side, that as a regular company, enterprise, startup, aspiring startup, right? How are ways in which we are seeing AI being used on a regular basis. And of course, you would have come across already, or you would be dabbling in, or deploying already. But I'll just spend some time in explaining how various functions within a corporation are being changed, which is all part of largely operations, right? So
yes, I think that'd be fantastic. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think I would categorize broadly these AI interventions into two parts, right? One is simply redesigning operations because you now have a better interface, either for the end user or for your own employees, because of the advent of LLMs and the end applications related to that, right? So this is one broad bucket. The second is redesigning the company itself totally, because because AI is now very, very powerful, right? So I'll give you examples of maybe a simple example from my own personal experience, and then probably talk about some examples that I see outside, right? So the difference that now let's go to the two categories, right? Interface one, very simple. I'll explain in a bit. The core part where you redesign the company itself, use because AI has changed, right? Is only possible when AI is the core of what you do, right? Now, let's take an example. So we did a platform called GenY Labs. This was a consumer insights platform. We wanted to change the way market research is done globally, right? And we were using deep learning, but not LLMs weren't there at the time, right? They were just getting started. I think the transformer paper had just come and so on, right? So that was the era. So the idea was that we will just use a bunch of data, private and publicly available, and create signals which are relevant to marketers, right? So this used a bunch of models. So there was one model for detecting the demography of the user, what age he might be based on the language being spoken, what is the location, etc. Then you would gender based on name. Then you had sentiment models of whether he's happy, sad, angry, whatever, right? And then you would have, um, you know, some attribution that what is the root cause this consumer, he or she is sad because of poor customer care, a poor quality of product received, whatever it might be, right? So we created this bunch of models, all industry specific, right? Huge problem, multiple models, um, very relevant, right? A good TAM, etc. So we had learned our lessons from what we were doing, right? And so it was high complexity because you had to do individual models for every industry, multiple, like almost an assembly line of model. So let's say a person would put in a complaint or call the contact center, and we would ingest that data in real time, translate it into the baseline language, run these assembly line of models of different types, and give some insight to the marketer in real time, right? So this was GenY Labs. If I were to do this business today, right, it would be much more simpler because I don't need this assembly line of multiple small models. There is one large models, one large model or assembly of two, three large models, which can do all of this very efficiently, cost efficiently, development efficiently, and give a much more enhanced outcome and insight to the marketer, right? So if I would redo this business, this would be completely different. I would architect it differently. I would, uh, you know, change everything about how we thought about it, right? So that is a category of business which needs to be completely rethought, right? Now let's overlay this example on various aspects of operation, right, in a company. And let's assume that, and we'll try to see if we can bucket it in category A, which is user interface, some process redesign, or complete rethink, right? So if I were to just start with things like strategy, let's say strategy, which I did, back at Ola, right? Or earlier, when, all startup founders need to do some strategy, right? So how would I think about it? There is no user interface per se. There is some, but more what analysts consume, right? It's a very creative function. You need to think, which is about things which are not there, which are coming, and so on. And a lot of resources and time go into consuming insights from secondary sources. 80% of time a lot of money in reports, subscriptions, this, that, and the other. In the ideal setup, if we were to redesign a strategy function, we would allocate a huge amount of resources on primary interactions, going to the ground, meeting people, understanding firsthand how things are being done in India, overseas, globally, etc. And the compromise is always made in the conventional setup that you have a bunch of analysts reaming reports, gleaning insights, telling you a few interactions, 80-20 roughly. And that's how strategy is done today, right? Which is actually not ideal. The ideal world, if you imagine the ideal, and today AI enables you to imagine the ideal, it is, I would love to get an encapsulated view which forms my early hypothesis, which is all secondary research, but I want it on day one. And then day 1 to day 30, let's say I have a month to do my strategy for a new thing. I should be on the ground, meeting people, experts, domain guys, etc., etc. So this 1 day to 30 day is today the reverse almost, right? So I would completely redesign the strategy team and the way it functions, the metrics with which we measure the incentives of doing more secondary than primary than secondary, completely, right? And take a higher order bar on quality of output, etc., than we were used to. Now, this is something that can be done today, right? And you would have all experienced if you were to brainstorm on a very cutting edge technology. Let's say I took the example of solid state transformers. So you would have done it already with Perplexity or deep research within ChatGPT, right? You just brainstorm what are the new trends in transmission, what about solid state transformers, what are the alternatives, etc. You'll get a encapsulated thing, even a projection of what is to come, right? So this really completes your null hypothesis with which you can start the strategy exercise, right? So that's an example where I would completely redesign. I would get different tools, different org design, different capability set, less analysts, more higher level thinkers, more networkers in my strategy team than a bunch of analysts reading reports and repurposing and summarizing it for the leadership, right? So that's an example. Now let's go to marketing. This is obvious, isn't it? Basically, generative. The word generative itself says all forms of content, image, video, text. This completely needs to be redone right now, right? I have seen examples of companies which are unicorns doing hundreds of million in ARR, and the marketing team is one. There's a company which is marketing team of one, right? All newsletters, all content publishing, all thought leadership, etc., etc. Creative, right? It's unbelievable, right? And so the amount of leverage and the org design that you need to think about marketing, the supporting companies, etc., that you work with, it needs to be completely redesigned, right? And that is today. If you are not doing it today, you are falling behind in that sense, right? Then let's go to operations, right? So now operations is very broad, and it again falls to whether it is core to you or it is AI is core to you or can change the core itself, or it is peripheral in that sense. So let's take things that are to be done today. Otherwise, you're falling behind, right? So I would say things like customer support, right? Completely redesign, right? I'll tell you from my experience, we did 1/10 reduction in contact center, and pre-post measurements were similar, right? So a lot could be done. This is an industry which was already going towards automation. A lot was already happening, so it's not all attributable to generative AI, maybe the conventional AI, right? But this momentum is continuing to go. So if there is a company which has a customer support, you can do a lot more with the with a new org design by deployment of AI and be very cost efficient also. So that's definitely one area which falls into the category of complete redesign and starting today, right? Everything is possible today, right? And there are companies like Unifor, etc., who are already doing great. You would see more and more such companies innovating, especially from India. Then, let's say you are an operations heavy company doing manufacturing. You have a shop floor. Now you have these workers. There's a lot of downtime or errors, etc., that happen because information is not available or the training is not adequate, and that is not changeable. It depends on the individual, the trainer, the setup, etc. But we have seen manufacturing companies redesign the way they do uh, operations management, the flow on the shop floor, etc., by making information available to um, uh, the technicians, right? So that they can just, if they're stuck, they can triangulate back what would have gone wrong and self-correct in a step-by-step manner without having to go to their supervisor, stopping the assembly line and doing this, right? So huge impact can be had. I'm not going into safety, etc., but shop floor safety can be massively enhanced by just computer vision type AI, which can indicate whether people are following the right PPE, wearing the right headgear, etc., that is required in areas. So there is huge amount of change that is happening. The use of robotics, which is actually AI powered, we'll talk about it maybe later, is redesigning the way machine-human interaction happens with the advent of cobots, etc. You will see in India also factories are starting to use cobots, maybe piloting it, but 2 years and you will see it will become almost mainstream, right? So I think the amount of the way operations in such core areas can be done is completely being rethought. And again, and a thing where an early start today is you should start doing pilots of some sort if you're into that kind of operational domain in manufacturing and so on, right? Yeah, I think some things like let's say coding, right? This is a no-brainer. It has already transitioned, right? With and without Copilot, our first measurement was 50% more code lines of code or repos being checked in. Whichever metric you took, it was almost 50% more. Now it might be 2x, right? So again, entire engineering org could be changed by doubling down on architecture, more product thought, more creative elements versus QA, code verification, the amount of hours you spend in code review, right? And then the programming itself, right? So that's the bulk of your engineering org today. And that could be completely rationalized, rethought, etc. So again, a case where if you're not doing it, do it now because you're falling behind if you are not doing it. It's a competitive edge, right? So I think these are some examples. There's a long list, no matter what function there's something which is happening in either of these categories, right? I'll give an obvious example on the former category, which is sales, right? How do you interact with the consumer? If you have not changed over the past 6 months, it's a problem. Just go and get this change, right? The interface change is the first obvious change that every industry should be doing, right? And if you're in a company which is still using the same system or infrastructure to engage with consumers as they were doing earlier, whether upstream when you're selling or advertising to them, to downstream when they have converted and you're providing support, etc., engaging with the consumer in some way or the developer or whoever you're selling to in some way, this is the time. It's already late in a way, right? You should have started 6 months earlier, right? And you would see that these actions or decisiveness in this makes a big difference very quickly, right? Because this is an exponential change that people don't get intuitively. exponential changes are very difficult to imagine, right? So if a couple of years, then you will see, oh my God, we are so behind as a company, right? And it will be very difficult to root cause it then, because other people would have moved, and that this is a relative advantage that is there, right? So that's an example.
I think this is super helpful. And my takeaway from this is um, just using these capabilities for both internal and external facing functions within the company. It allows you obviously to do things much faster, right? Like from one of your examples, it allows you to like hyper personalize things, whether it's in terms of say the learning and education of a shop floor technician or marketing communication with a customer. It helps you drive significant amounts of progress on productivity and cost, right? Whether it's in terms of the size of your contact center or your engineering team. So I guess in terms of cost, in terms of specificity and personalization, and in terms of like speed of just how much you can do. It's like a bunch of like really useful examples from your side. And I think the most important thing you said at the very end was these changes are exponential. If you don't do them now, you will see them as having happened 2 years later, and then it will be too late to catch up at this point of time. Maybe leaning a little bit into this last part of what you said, right? I think whenever organizations are trying to implement new technology, right, even if it was like the basic stuff, like when you were giving the shop floor examples of, say, just implementing SAP back in the day or basic digitization, and now here talking about potentially redesigning the entire flow using new technology, right? Any advice, any thoughts for people on how to sort of think about this change management, right? Both in terms of how do you prioritize, how do you decide, what is the low hanging fruit, what do I go to next? And then also in terms of handling the organization change that has to happen, right? People have to adapt to new ways of working. Any thoughts and any lessons from your long career having seen a variety of change management having been implemented in various places?
Yeah. So there is, I think I would categorize it as when change happens, which is kind of linear, and change which is exponential, right? When it is a linear change, it's easier because it is not non-disruptive. It is incremental across implementation. The thought is incremental, the implementation is incremental. Humans adapt really well with incrementality, right? So that is fine. But this falls under the bracket of exponential change, right? So there will be disruption. And whenever disruption happens, there are certain things which are essential, right? So one is the top management or leadership or founder resolve that this is needed, right? And it will cause disruption. But if we don't do it, we'll become irrelevant. If not in the 6 months, 2, 3 years, we'll just lose our competitive edge, right? So change management in an exponential changing environment is disruptive. And therefore, by design, it would require a lot of determination and focus, time involvement, top down, right? With no exception. So that is like element number one, right? So for example, okay, let's take the example which you would have seen in the Bay Area when Twitter let go so many people, and then Facebook let go so many people, then Microsoft started letting go so many people, and so on. And people were saying that you are raking billions in profit for, let's say, Meta or Microsoft, and you are the profit pool is increasing every year. So there is a growth rate in profit also. It's not stagnated or anything, right? So what is the need for letting go people, right? And you would understand from companies like these who have never done these kind of measures, right? Forget in bad times, in great times. These were great times for the company. They took this call that we need to rethink how we do this organization, because if we don't do it, we'll lose our competitive edge. We need to locate resources somewhere else for the future, etc. And some roles are truly becoming redundant, right? Now, that's a tough call given the context of the company, which is doing well, etc. But it had to be done, because if you don't do it, you'll be falling behind. And this is the nature of the game, right? Stakes are high. So that is, I think, one. The second is, when implementing such things, it is always good to have a special team created with a lot of empowerment, by virtue of tag teaming with the top leadership, um, not relegated to a team which tries some pilots here and there, right? You cannot do that. So a crack team working with the founders or CEOs, CXOs, whoever the leadership is, program managing the entire implementation, minute monitoring whether everybody's following these kind of things, and a regular cadence with the leadership on what are we achieving with it. So as an example, if it is about an HR org redesign, right? You will want a metric on it. If you are wanting to do engineering productivity increase, there should be daily metrics on how many check-ins happened. Are there qualitative metrics that we are collecting, etc. Right? So this mega dashboard for a large operation, especially program managed centrally, is very important. Now, then, of course, there is the incentive disincentive, right? So you need to put the incentive disincentive at the get-go, think very deeply about it, so that everybody is incentivized to do it, and it's not left to a matter of huge debate, discussion, etc., etc. All of the points that I'm mentioning is in view of the exponential change that is happening. If it was incremental, we would have done it in a very non-disruptive, smooth manner, right? But such changes are required. Sometimes you may have to redo your business itself, right? Maybe change the business model completely, right? Those are tough decisions. So you need this first motivation, incentives, a crack team, right cadence, right? It's almost like starting a new business from scratch, and whatever you needed then is needed now, right? So that's how I would deal with change management in the times of an exponential change.
Awesome. I think that's a really good way to put it. So first of all, you need the support from your founders or whoever is leading those functions, and they really need to be on board that this is something we want to do. After that, you really need to be able to solve all of those bits and pieces, put it all together, and figure out what really works for you. And doing it, the sooner that we do it, the better the results will be. So that's a very that's something I think is a really good way to look at it. Here, I would say from my personal experience as well as some other people who might be on this call might relate to this, that when you are not in that leadership position, like when you are, say, middle management, you have identified a particular process that could very easily be automated. AI could be brought in, it would make the entire function 100x simpler, more efficient, etc. But since AI and its demonstrated capabilities in the particular function that you might be talking about might be very limited, leadership might be hesitant to bring it that disruptive change to the organization, which might currently be running very smooth. So, in these kind of scenarios, how do you pitch to the leadership that this is something we should definitely be doing? How do you get their buy-in, and how do you kind of get it done? Like this is something that's a challenge that I personally have been facing in my organization as well. So, would like to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think this is really interesting. I think it flips the question a little bit from the top down to, if you have individual contributions who see the value of disruptive technology and they want to evangelize it within the organization, get leadership buy-in. How do you do it? I mean, I resonate with Shogoto. I tried to implement an AI vision system in the factory when I was at P&G. It took a lot of effort. Finally, we were able to get in some buy-in, but then it took a lot of time to be able to implement things. The results were delayed, and then it didn't really go anywhere. Right? In hindsight, I would probably do it in a very different way. So I'm curious to know how you think people should consider approaching this from an individual contributor, from a junior middle management perspective.
So there are various ways to look at it. If I were to broadly bucket, right? So one is middle management should always look upon themselves as leaders of the company of the future, right? And one of the key skills of a potential leader is influencing skills. Can you influence, socialize the idea in some ways, find the right mechanisms to make compelling cases, right? So this is what an aspirational middle management needs to do, right? Now, let's say you are in a peculiar organization which is completely impervious. You can't do anything, right? Or it is just too difficult, right? My personal opinion is if you really believe that this is a great idea, can make a big impact in companies like the ones where you are or outside, just jump out and create it, right? Move out of that organization because you might be wasting your time, right? And the one lesson that I didn't tell before, right, is that in any role, any company, whether big or small, you will be spending a huge number of hours, especially as you progress in your career, right? The higher up you go, the more stress you will have, the more hours you will put in, etc. So, and this is regardless of whether you are an entrepreneur or you are an operator, whatever it is, right? So it's the incentive is just do your own thing, right? Because that is the best expression of creativity that God gave you, right? Or the talent that God gave you is to create something new from scratch, enable other people, provide employment and all the good stuff, right? So my answer will be purely more extreme in that sense that if it is impervious, you are good at influencing, but still it is impervious, just move out, don't waste time. Because this time of exponential changes, right, offers huge openings and moments of innovation to entrepreneurs, right? So if you are stuck in that kind of sense, just move out, man.
That's actually quite a good take at it. If the leadership themselves are not ready to take the risks to disrupt their own internal processes, they probably are not ready to take the risk to grow their business to the scale that it needs to. Right? So I
Yeah.
think that's something that makes a lot
Yeah.
of sense. That's a good way to
Yeah.
look at it.
Yeah. And I would not say this with that much conviction, maybe 10 years back, 7 years back, right? Because it was not a time for exponential change. There was incrementality in changes. You were making process 20% more efficient. You were not rethinking the process itself. Today, you are doing it. So if your management is not doing it, even while they are hearing all the signals and so on, then there is and if this part is core to the business, then it is anyways right for disruption, right? It is going to be disrupted one way or the other, right? So it's a better thing in such times to venture out and experiment a little bit with life than we keep trying hard.
Got it. Got it. I think another particular example that I can think of while we are trying to implement AI into our day-to-day business processes is that while AI is able to do generic tasks with a very very good accuracy, there are some issues that AI also faces. So, for example, if there are tasks which require a lot of niche capabilities or a lot of niche knowledge requirements, those become some things where AI is not able to do it well. Or maybe let's say even if the task is something that the AI model can be trained for, the task might be so niche, so small that the ROI is not enough worth it. Right? You can't train a new model for that just because you want to replace, let's say, 10 employees doing that job. So that's one aspect that we typically face a lot of issues in. At the same time, another issue that comes up in some of these cases is the data security. Since the firm that I currently work with deals with US healthcare and the revenue cycle management of that, something that we face on a day-to-day basis is access to the data to be able to do the job that we need to do, right? So let's say we have to integrate our systems with Epic, with NextGen, or all the other, software providers that are there in the US healthcare system. But that access is limited by these mammoth organizations. So it really limits the capabilities for us to be able to perform well. So given these kind of scenarios where data security is an issue, et cetera, how is it that you feel that AI is going to go forward and make an impact in these specific fields? Or, something relevant might be done in these specific fields, if at all. What is your take on it?
Yeah, I think that's a very relevant question, and many organizations, are very cautious in using AI and implementing these changes because of this fear of one, the data residency, whether it goes outside for training the baseline model itself, in what way, form is unclear, and then the other is the ROI point you mentioned, that is it worth doing your own model if you want to trade off in favor of privacy and data residency in-house and so on, right? So let's tackle the second part first, right? So which is ROI. Now, the great thing about the changes in AI is, and it will continue, is a great open source, movement, driven primarily started by Llama, but Meta probably, but multiple efforts that are going in a very thriving open source community that is building this, and that gives you an opportunity to leverage all of that. And the benefit of that is you own the model, right? You take a baseline model, fine tune it, use the weights as a starting point, implement it on-prem or on your cloud in AWS or Azure, in your private containers and so on. So you're not using any out-of-the-shelf model per se, right? And that gives you a big advantage. And most cases in enterprise will fall under this, where you have some contextual knowledge repository and you have a generative capability of a baseline model. And because you have narrowed down the problem to your domain, your company, your ecosystem, it can do with a small model a lot of the functionality which you would expect from a large model without the issues or hallucinations that are associated with large models. The issue is that hallucinations are like a feature, right? It is creativity. It is in reality creativity. And the more the model knows, the more creative it gets, right? So you need to, the moment you narrow it down, a smaller model is capable enough. You are fully in control of the development, the repositories that are being used for both fine tuning as well as things like RAG, etc., where you are basing it on a knowledge repository, right? So that's the way to deal with it. Leverage open source, right? If you're very small, you're doing a lower stakes experiment, start with OpenAI APIs, and they also give you containerized solutions, right? Where you don't have to worry about whether the data is going anywhere, or of course, this was the biggest objection that all enterprise customers had, and this was the first solution that they created to protect against this, right? So that has given a lot of comfort to people, and so that is there also, right? Then let's say you are on public cloud, you don't want to do in-house on-prem mini data center type of your own. Even all the AWS or Google, etc., have their Vertex, their AI playground, and so on, right? Where they provide these containerized solutions for you, right? Where you don't have to, you can make a copy of a public model, run the fine tuning in your space with no data issue, security issue whatsoever. And almost all of these companies or public cloud providers provide for the most popular open source model. So if you want to just get started and let's say low stakes to higher risk and higher stakes, I would go from start with open AI APIs, right? Move to an equivalent uh, smaller open source model on public cloud, right? But in your own environment, of course, right? And then when you see the outcomes coming, you just switch to a completely in-house open source based model, but on-prem, etc., for additional comfort and security and maybe latency considerations, right? So I think that is how you may be able to think through this uh, versus going one way or the other, right? So that resolves both your ROI problem. The smaller the model, the more on-prem you have, or the more on public cloud in a pay-as-you-go setup you have, you solve the ROI issue. Smaller model, pay-as-you-go, right? And the data privacy issue is again solved by these open source models, which you have fully containerized in your public or on-prem kind of setup.
I think that's really helpful. This really solves a lot of issues that might be there for smaller companies when they want to do some of these functions. So thanks a lot for that.
Yeah.
Ravi, thank you so much for spending the time with us today to talk through all of these different things. I think as we come to the close of the session, maybe one important question, right, that everyone's going to have is the world is changing so fast. There's just so much information, right? You've been the business head of an AI company. You're at a deep tech fund that's looking at AI innovation very, very closely. Any recommendations for your go-to sort of sources of content, of knowledge, of information that you would like to share with the community in terms of how they can keep themselves updated on things that are happening with regards to AI innovation today? Because I think there's a bunch of stuff that you told us, which after you said it was like, oh, we should have known this, right? Including the last example that you gave about how to think about open source models, containerized models. But it says something that we didn't know, right? So it's clear there's a lot of, like, even in today's time, there can be information asymmetry if you allow it to be there. So any advice on how we can all stay up to date and keep ourselves current and relevant with the changes in AI?
I think specifically about, so deep tech is a big domain with multiple things. Specifically for AI, I would strongly encourage people to start using AI as a developer, creating new applications using OpenAI APIs, etc. Create a Hugging Face account, try something, right? Go close to the developmental environment, because you will be then not developing itself, but going through the conversation flow, you will know, okay, which direction is the wind blowing now, right? What is the new model that has come up, where there is excitement in the developer world, etc. So this is one way to do it, that go close to where the action is. And you need not be a hardcore developer actually, right? Because that's the entire thing that AI has done, made everybody some sort of a creator, right? So that's number one. The second is I find within your organizations, do a lot of demos and use your training time or whatever you would have for career enhancement. Repurpose all of that to AI usage, right? Do hackathons which are AI related, so that you learn from the team itself, right, of what is possible. And they would, this is like summarizing of all the knowledge that exists in your organization, right? And typically it will be more with the guys who are younger, developing today, than leadership, right? So break that gap by doing these kind of engagements and learn from them firsthand, right? So this is the second practical approach to getting hands-on or maybe grounded in AI in some way, right? The third is there is a lot of, I find these analyst reports from all these, investment banks like Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley and so on, very good. So maybe subscriptions like those could be very helpful. I find these podcasts like Acquired or All In and so on very useful, right? They are always at the reporting on the latest and also sharing the vision of what is going to come. Those are very helpful. So plenty of resources out there, right? But nothing like getting close to action, either yourself or as a proxy by organizing your training sessions, etc., repurposing it in the right way, right? So that's, I think, on AI specifically, that's how I would go about it.
Ravi, thank you so much for spending the time with us. Thank you, everybody who joined the call and dedicated a Sunday morning to this conversation. Have a great rest of your weekend. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks,
Thanks a lot, Ravi.
Rohit,
That was
team,
really
for
enlightening.
having me. Thank you.
It
Thank you
was
so
our
much.
pleasure. Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.